Well, first of all, welcome, and thank you very much. Aha, we have some volume. Thank you very much for coming along. It's great to see so many of you. I think this is possibly the biggest gathering we've ever had, which is a very good thing. You'll notice that we're actually filming this session. This is so that we can put this on the hub so that our colleagues in centres, units and institutes and in Bristol and in London can also see this event. And we'll be doing this with all the future events. We have a plan whereby we do these now every third Thursday in the month, every month. That's alongside all the other things that your council will be doing with your CEOs or exec chairs or anyone else. So this will become sort of UKRI Thursdays, I dare say we'll end up calling it. So in terms of the filming, we've got a couple of roaming mics. So when we get to questions, if you stick your hand up, a roaming mic will head towards you so that we can all hear what your question is. So I think that's the housekeeping. I also should say thank you to JBOS, the Joint Business and Offices Services, I think you're called, who are doing all the facilitation for these and doubtless will continue to do so. So thank you for that, because that's probably a new activity for them. So that's the sort of housekeeping side of it. In terms of who we are, I'm obviously Anne Dixon, and currently I'm the Programme Director for UKRI, and Jan Juillerat's going to join me on the HR front later, and she'll introduce herself. And then from 1st of April, I'll become the Operations Director for UKRI. So that's who we are. So we're going to start off with a sort of an update on the progress that you all collectively have made. There are very many people in the room who are actually making UKRI get off the ground. But before that, we always start these presentations with the vision, which you all hopefully by now know, and also with the strategic objectives. Now, I'm not going to go through these because they're all over the building and hopefully you know them. The only thing I would say is that from a comms point of view, when you're out and about talking to academics, universities, businesses, entrepreneurs, we now have slide sets of all this content so that you can frontispiece your work, whatever you're having the meeting about, to also cover off UKRI so that there's a common understanding out there about what we are and what we're doing. The other housekeeping point I hadn't made is the tapping. These are our friends who are making coffee. So this is not someone banging on the table. This is actually the baristas doing their job. That's all right. So in terms of progress, we purposefully set out to do a huge amount of the heavy lifting last autumn because we knew the more that we could get done last autumn, the easier we would have of a smooth sort of glide path down to land on the runway on 1st of April. So we did have a very tense and dense autumn, but it's really paying off now because we've only got a few major problems left, which is a great thing. So obviously starting off with research and innovation itself, we obviously significantly contributed to the industrial strategy that Bayes published. Bayes agreed which bits of their organisation was going to be lifted and shifted into UKRI. We can talk a bit more about that when we get to staff matters. We secured a very good package, it's fair to say, for research and innovation with Treasury, not just for the next year or this year coming, but also the 2.4% of GDP is now enshrined. And that is a very, very significant increase in the funds that we can distribute to academics, universities and businesses. So this is a major achievement, and it means we're going into a big growth pattern pretty soon. We also announced the first of the shared capabilities. So we've got international, which Andrew Thompson will lead on, infrastructure, which Brian Bauscher is leading on, and Bryony Butland has come over to help him on that. And Jennifer Rubin, who hasn't actually joined us yet, who's going to be the new exec chair of ESRC, will take on place. So we've started to embed the shared capabilities, and there will be more of them, it's fair to say. So then moving on to communications. Obviously, we've published the vision, the narrative, the strategic objectives. All of these things are on the hub, so pull them down whenever you need them. We established an interim brand because we had to get going. We are working towards a fuller brand, but that's a much lengthier activity. We conducted many dozens of staff workshops. We've had well over 1,000, maybe even 2,000 people at those workshops, covering everything from how you perceive change, how you perceive values, doing lots of organisational design testing, making sure that the designs we've got are going to work in the real world. We've done 2 pulse surveys of all of you, and the results, I think, are reasonable. They're obviously not brilliant. We wouldn't expect them to be brilliant. That would be rather weird, actually. But they are reasonable, I think it's fair to say. And, of course, we've published a lot of information on the Hub, which is now becoming the sort of the repository. The Hub, technologically, is an interim solution because some of our institutes and partners have, quite rightly, very strong firewalls. And so we're going to put in a more secure hub later. So the content doesn't change, but some of the technology behind it will change. But the hub for now is fine. If you do find any colleagues that can't get into it for some reason, do let internal comms know, and they'll see if they can try and fix it. So moving on to finance. So this has been led by Philippa Foster at STFC with the whole of the finance community. They've been very holistic on this, as have HR actually. So we had a rather bizarre PAYE reference issue with HMRC. I'm not going to bore you with it, but it could have been a very difficult situation if we hadn't resolved it, but we did. We also had similar tax and VAT issues, and most of these issues are about the fact that we don't actually exist yet. So, in HMRC sort of linear mode, we had a bit of computer says no to begin with, but we did resolve it all. We also agreed with Treasury to start using operating expenditure. So historically, we've had admin budgets and programme budgets, and some of the programme budgets have been used to support the administrative endeavour, if you like. So things like, running seminars and that sort of thing. But now we're going to have an operating expenditure methodology, which your finance people fully understand and can explain to you. But the great thing from our point of view is it means that we have more freedom across the 2 categories. So, if you're a program manager or similar, you can now choose how you spend your money across those pieces. So this is a really good thing for us. And then going back to the program, the bit that I run, we're well within budget. So that's worked out very well. And we're mainly well within budget, frankly, because of the generosity of all the 9 councils in not fastidiously cross-charging us for all the many volunteers that we've got. So thank you for that. It's a lot less hassle to not have to cross-charge, plus it's helped us a lot to get through the finances very sort of successfully, if you like. So then going on to HR, as I say, I'm going to leave HR questions to Jan, but we have agreed that as a default we'll use the EPSRC terms and conditions and the new blended pay bands for all of the new employees we need to start recruiting now, who may well join on 1st of April or beyond, or before. So we have a default position so that we can carry on with the business, as it were. We've published a lot of high-level organograms, which are on the Hub, and in some cases lower-level organograms as well. We obviously chose the operations director and the finance director, and we'll be announcing the HR director just as soon as we can. And we issued about 7,200 notification of transfer letters, which are not transfer letters. You will be getting the transfer letters in February. Yeah, in February. Because obviously your employers, your current employers, have to do the transfer from your council to UKRI. So HR have been a very sort of mature and sophisticated group who started work, 2 or 3 years ago, I think, really, as did finance. So going on to estates, we had some very interesting negotiations with the Cabinet Office and finally secured 58 Victoria Embankment, which some of you might know as the Nesta building. It's where Nesta are housed. It's a rather gorgeous place, I think it's fair to say. It's got balconies overlooking the Thames where you can eat your lunch. It's got very nice cafes. It's got a 200-seat theatre. It's got a bike park. It's got all the things that you want in life. So that has been a major achievement, and now we're at the fit-out stage because it's a blank canvas. It's a old frontage but with a brand new building behind. So we're into the detailed fit-out and planning and obviously IT side of things. We're probably not going to be able to get in until the end of May or even June. Because of these protracted negotiations, it all took longer than we thought. But I think those of you who need to go and work in London occasionally or even quite frequently, it's going to be an amazing touchdown space. It will all be, apart from Sir Mark's office possibly, it will all be hot desks. So you're free to come and go as you wish. And there's quite a lot of meeting room space there. We're also going to keep on at Kemble Street until 2019 as planned. So the conference suite on the 13th floor of Kemble Street will also still be available to you for meetings. So we're going to be pretty well furnished for meeting rooms one way or another. The Nesta building also has generic meeting spaces that you can rent out, but you do pay for them, as you can imagine. So going on to planning, so the first draft, this actually is the first draft of the 3-year plan, which I'm going to come on to. But also in planning, we've done all the scenario testing I talked about. But I think I'm going to come on to transformation, am I not? Yes, I am. So I'll leave that one for now because it's on a further slide. So going on to governance, we have made very substantial progress with council appointments. Some councils now have got their full set of recommendations that they will put forward as to which persons they would like to nominate to be on council. One council's running a little bit later for various good reasons, but hopefully by the end of February we will all know who our new council members are, which will be great, and they will get sign-off in February. And the second main piece of governance is any arm's length body or NDPB has to have what's called a framework agreement. And the framework agreement is about the relationship between BEIS and us, and UKRI, and it's the sort of rules of engagement type document. So there's the UKRI group here, Governance, Audit, Risk and Information Insurance, have been working very, very closely with BEIS to come up with a very sensible framework agreement. A lot of it is very commonsensical. You must have an audit committee, you must have a health and safety presence, the sort of things that you would expect anyway. But that is now in final draft form, so we're doing quite well on the framework agreement, and it's one of the sort of rock stones, if you like, of the future. So that's been a very good piece of work. So what's going on at the moment? BEIS have still got quite a lot of work to do, in that we've obviously got to file our accounts for this financial year. And as you know, that can take about 6 months after the end of March. And that's one of the reasons why we're leaving the councils open for 6 months after 1st of April. And then the other very major piece of work is transferring non-UK assets from the councils to UKRI. So UK assets are automatically transferred under the Act. Don't have to worry about those. But what we have discovered is we have about 30,000 international assets from, pockets of land in Guatemala bought in 1947, where we may or may not be able to find the deeds, through to all sorts of other things. So you can imagine this is a huge undertaking to transfer these assets. So we've actually employed a specialist firm to help us, and it's all ongoing, but it's obviously just a huge volume of work to be done. And again, one of the reasons we're leaving the councils open for 6 months is obviously we may not completely finish all that work by 1st of April because we don't know what we don't know. So that work is ongoing, but there's a team in BEIS doing that, and they're doing very well on that front. So naturally, we've got a few remaining technical issues. These are the 3 remaining issues I talked about earlier. The first one is, the first 2 actually affect centres, units and institutes. And the first one is about business rates. All our centres, units, institutes and head office here enjoy an 80% discount on rates, basically, rates you pay to the council and that sort of thing, because we have charitable status in that context. Now, of course, because we don't exist, we can't be a charity, therefore you could argue we don't get charitable status. So this is something we've had to elevate with HMRC. We've had one successful test case so far, which is Cambridge City Council. We obviously own quite a lot of property in Cambridge, not least the Laboratory for Molecular Biology, very big site, and we've got a successful test case in Cambridge. So we're definitely on a sort of successful track on that front. With all of these 3 remaining things, we do have plans A, B and C. So if we don't get what we want, which is plan A, we do have a B and a C behind it as well. Second one is EU grants. So across our centres, units and institutes, we have about 100 Horizon 2020 grants and about 100 non-2020 grants. And what we'd like to do, obviously, is transfer them in a block rather than one by one. So we've got to work with UKRI and the European Commission to negotiate the block transfer. And again, if we're not successful, worst cases, we'd have to do them one by one, which would be tedious, but it is a job of work. We could do it. So that work is ongoing. And again, with most of these problems, we very much hope that common sense prevails at the end of the day. Thus far it has, which is good. And then the third one is terms and conditions. As I said earlier, our default position is EPSRC terms and conditions because there are more employees on those than anything else, certainly in this building. But obviously we would like to tidy up terms and conditions. When we looked across the 9 councils, there are 42 different terms and conditions, which come down to 31 when you take out duplicates. We've agreed with the TUs 10 of them, which are self-evident, and now we're just in negotiations right now, today, in fact, on the remaining ones. So this is just, with a lot of this work, we've discovered there are slightly different 9 ways of doing everything. You can imagine, it's not surprising. The fourth item that's not on here, but is not really necessarily a programme issue, it's a generic issue, is all about vacancies and recruitment. At the moment, all the councils have reasonably high vacancy levels, often because of market forces. There's nothing to do with the programme to a great extent, in that we're struggling in certain types of employees to recruit them enough and quickly enough. So there's a generic problem. There is the added burden, if you like, of there being quite a lot of new UKRI vacancies coming up. So there's lots of opportunity for you guys, in that there's lots of interesting jobs coming up. In terms of the work that has shifted from Bays to UKRI, very few Bays employees are choosing to accept their match. Obviously they've been matched because it's the same job in a different employer. Probably this is personal view because they want to keep their civil service status, and because there's a huge number of vacancies in Bays itself. There's a lot of opportunity in Bays as well, not least because of Brexit. So there's a lot of opportunity for you guys. There's going to be a lot of vacancies coming up in the future, which is great on the one hand, but of course not so great in HR, where there's going to be a volume of work that's going to need to be done. It's just a fact of life. It's something we're going to have to live through over the next few months. So that's the progress that we've made, which I hope is useful and interesting to you. I think the key point is nearly all of it's been done by you guys. All the people that work for me at the moment are volunteers, bar 2 or 3 specialist consultants. So it's actually you that have done all this. So well done. I think you should pat yourself on the back, frankly, because this has been a mammoth effort, and we've really got through a vast amount of work. So I'm really pleased about that. On the other hand, there's 49 working days to go. There are 9 Thursdays left before we go live. So we need to really make sure that flight path is nice and smooth, that everything goes very well, and that we enter UKRI in pretty good shape. So just moving on to the future, what we used to call transformation, we're not calling it that anymore because we think it's a bit derogatory, so we're just calling it the 3-year plan. So you've all got your own delivery plans, strategic plans. You know what you're going to do with the 6 billion that make up those plans. Those things are published, they're out there, we don't need to replicate those. But what we have got with all this new funding is up to another 2 billion on top of that. Now, obviously, we have to plan for that, and we have to plan for what we'd already intended to do for corporate services. So we have created a 3-year plan for those things. It's been to your CEOs twice, so they've had time to iterate and work on it and get through it. And then it's going to our main board next week. And then one of the requests for the main board is, can we please share it with you, even though it's in sort of final draft form, just so you've got a roadmap of the next 3 years going forward. You can see what's coming up and start thinking particularly about things like workforce planning and what you're going to need to do to deliver some pretty chunky pieces of work. So that's how the future is looking. So I'm going to stop there and take any questions about that content, and then Jan's going to take over and tell you the latest on HR. So questions? Great. I'm very happy not to have any. Oh, here we go. Hang on, do you want to wait for the mic?
Thank you, Anne. I think I liked your slide where you said remaining technical issues and you highlighted what those are. I think a slide which says what we are considering for day one would be also useful so staff knows what issues are being looked at which they'll consider for day one, for example, what the email, etc. would look like. That would be very useful because there are a number of issues and we won't be looking at all of them for day one. So just a summary slide would be very useful.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback. I mean, I didn't bore you with the detail of those technical issues on things like EU grants because it only affects so many people and, you know, some of it's quite tactical. But obviously on the generic stuff for day one, which I would say are not issues, they're just news, if you like. So do I have to have a UKRI email or can I just keep my own? It's the latter. Unless you work for UKRI solely, in which case you probably want a UKRI email. And also, frankly, for lots of you, you might want to have both. Because in certain situations, you want to be perceived as UKRI, and in others, you want to be perceived as your council. So there is a digital and technology plan. There's a 1-year plan and a 3-year plan. And that's going to your CEOs and exec chairs next week, yeah. And so once it's been through them, we can share, and it does cover all that sort of thing, what you can expect. I mean, the main message is there won't be much change. In this building in particular, from a technology point of view, everything will be pretty much the same. The main changes are obviously going to be in 58 Victoria Embankment, where we have to start from scratch. And we've got a lot of people like Sir Mark who, you know, now will become sort of UKRI fully, as it were. So there isn't really a great deal to tell you in that there's not much change, but obviously we need to tell you there's not much change. Yeah, so that's a good point, yeah. Now, I will hand over to Jan just because she's got to get on a train to probably to go and see the unions, actually. So I'm going to hand over to her. And if you think of more questions, I'll come back afterwards, if that's okay.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks to the programme team for an opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Jan Juillerat. It's unspellable and unpronounceable, that's fine. And I'm Exec Director People and Development for BBSRC and also HR Director for NERC. And I was asked, the HR Directors Network were asked to speak today about right-to-work checks. So I'm going to speak to you just briefly about right-to-work checks, but obviously Anne and I, between us, will pick up what we can on the HR front. I obviously don't work for the HR Workstream and the HR programme, but I'll certainly answer what I can for you. So in terms of right-to-work checks, there have been a couple of communications which have come out via your current employer, and importantly via your employer because they are happening in most cases in advance of the transfer to UKRI. I think everybody will have been through this process when you were recruited. You'd have had your passport checked. This is about ensuring that you have a right to work in the UK. And what's happening is because UKRI will need a new licence to become an employer from the Home Office so that we can employ people from overseas, it means that we have to go through those checks again. So essentially it's a matter of compliance, it's Home Office compliance, and once we have done those checks, the Home Office will be satisfied that we have got a due process in place, can provide assurance, and we will get that licence for UKRI. Clearly that's quite important for the future of UKRI. So that's kind of why we need to do it. A couple of things that I will mention. The first is the trade unions and the Innovate Staff Consultative Committee have worked really well with us on this. We've talked it through at the Joint Consultative Committee, which is for the transfer of people through to UKRI, and they've worked very well with us, developed a Q&A, and essentially the documents that you will have seen, there should have been a communication on your local portal or web or briefing or whatever your normal newsletter approach is, either the 16th or 17th of this month, so earlier this week, which explained to you what was happening and what that process would be. The UK SBS immigration team We'll be working with local HR people, and the people who will be doing the checking have been trained, they have briefing, they know what they are doing. And the process will be that as and when the slot comes up, so there's, this is no good because I talk with my arms, I'm just going to have to put that down. So as and when you come up on the schedule, and there is a very broad schedule of when each area will be managed and will be checked, then your local HR team and SBS specialists will be there to do the checking. Please don't be concerned about this. If you have concerns now, talk to your HR people. If you have, on the day you haven't got the right documentation, please don't be concerned. We will work with you to make sure that, you know, if you are eligible to work in the UK and we've got an issue just about not having quite the correct document, please don't worry about that. It's not something people should be concerned about at all. And if you are, just talk to us, and we will be clear about what we need. There has been a list of documents circulated. You will get a list again of the acceptable documents as and when the slot comes up for your checking. So that's kind of broadly what I want to say, but obviously happy to answer any questions about the right to work checks. It just seemed very important to us that we keep reminding people, telling people about this. We don't want it to be a surprise for anybody, or for people not to understand why we are doing it. That's all I've got to say for now, but happy to take questions, obviously.
Thanks, Dan. So, just going back to the vacancy and recruitment point, a steady stream of new roles is now going to start rolling off your normal regular recruitment processes. So here are some examples which open at the moment. The Deputy Director, Governance, Assurance, Risk and Information, the Financial Controller and the Head of Management Reporting, they all close on the 21st of January. Then on the hub now, you can't see it from here, but hopefully in your packs on the tables, this is my new directorate. So I've got grants, research funding, D&T, health and safety, legal, estates, and planning, which will include business improvement and change, and a programme management office. So those will be advertised shortly. And then in terms of the popular questions, which we just had, I think we're going to... just hearing what you're saying now, I think we're going to devote the next Thursday meeting to day one and what it feels like on not just the practical stuff, but what it will feel like on day one. And as I've said before, this is the dichotomy we face in that for 98% of people, particularly in this building, it won't feel very different, but it is a big change programme, and we all just got to live with that dichotomy to a certain extent. So we will address those questions then. And then just a reminder that when you think of other questions, particularly HR ones, they have monthly drop-in sessions hosted by the HR people. Your local HR colleagues should be totally up to speed. And we obviously have questions at UKRI, which is for all generic questions. So keep them coming. It obviously always takes us a little bit of time to process the answers and make sure we get the right sort of technical answer for you, but we publish them in batches of about 50 at a time now. And where you can find more information, well, it's obvious that it's on the hub. But also, I mean, basically, come and find me if you want to know something. Is the easiest thing. I'm either an Innovate or I'm in CS16. And so those are the ways that we do questions, Maraki, aren't they? And then also, we've introduced a yellow dot system, I see today, which is to try and get a very vague sense of whether you found this useful. So as you leave, take your yellow dot with you and bung it on the yes or no column as to whether you found this event informative. So that was all I wanted to say, but if you think of more questions, I'm happy to take them now or later, one-to-one. I really don't mind. Thank you. Hi. Oh, we need a mic. Or use mine.
Hi Anne, thank you for addressing us this morning, and some of the information you've given us is really useful. I just want to know, why are bays being lifted and shifted and going through the matching process now, and does that indicate that for any of the roles that are coming into being, that any of the Research Council people are going to be treated in a similar fashion?
Yeah, so this is a good question. This is about the bays lift and shift. So the sorts of areas that are lifting and shifting are things like STEM influence, PSRE eligibility. These are things that have solely existed in bays, and we now perceive that they should solely exist in UKRI. So is total lift and shift of the actual work that needs to be done, the function. Therefore, the staff obviously have matched into it because it's exactly the same role. As I said earlier, very few have chosen to accept the match. But because that was an extremely straightforward move, that did happen earlier than our matching. And the main matching for us is in RCUK, where, again, there were people that were working across the councils. So the RCUK matching process is out there, I think, isn't it, on the hub? Yeah, it's on the hub. But, in fact, with RCUK, because it's a very sort of special group, we actually have guaranteed them that they will definitely have a role in the new world. So you can imagine comms will go to comms, international will go to international, and so on. It's pretty self-evident, and all those individuals have been spoken to individually, I hope. Andrew Lewis has very kindly agreed to, although he's gone over to UKSBS, to stay on and make sure every single person in RCUK has the job that's appropriate for them. So that's very decent of Andrew to do that, but he wants to sort of see the job done. So that's the matching process at the moment. But as I say earlier, very few people are choosing to accept matches in bays that were eligible to do so, which means there's lots of good opportunity for people here.
Hi Anne, thanks for telling us about the vacancies that will be arising and the opportunities. But as you know, Ian Kenyon has recently written to all the councils saying, what are your strategic resourcing needs? It's great that there's opportunities, but it does leave these very big holes back in individual councils' components of UKRI. So it was just a question, what's going to happen with that consolidated output that we've sent to Ian? Because obviously if we want to get on and deliver, which we do from day one in terms of actually the programme, we're going to have coordinated recruitment, I think, across the piece to make sure that we've got portfolio managers, that people are not falling over under the burden of delivering. So, and I know there's a huge burden on individual HR teams, so it's just what's going to happen to that, and when can we kind of start to plan and get people in?
Yeah, so this is a very good point, and yes, you're completely right on all of those fronts, in that because we've got a lot of new things to do, and some of you will want to go and do those new things, obviously there then becomes a bit of a backfill problem for a lot of councils, and a lot of councils already feel it. Some councils have been extremely generous in volunteering people to the programme and elsewhere. And yes, there is, a looming issue with just the sheer volume of recruitment we're going to need to do. So Ian is trying to collect the data, so we've got the facts before we do anything else. I don't know what's going to happen. My personal view is I think we're going to have to recruit a really crack, pure recruitment team just to do a very big piece of work. Maybe even outsource it, but probably not. This is not only my personal view. It may not work out this way, because we really need to focus on this. I can see, the HR people are very stretched, quite rightly so at the moment. So I think something reasonably radical is going to have to happen in order for us to get over this major hump where, a lot of the, say, new shared capabilities or, say, ISCF, they've begged, borrowed and stolen staff, at the moment, but it's not sustainable. We've really got to bring in, we've got to promote people from within, develop people from within, but also we've got to bring in quite a lot of new staff. So it's a very good point. Great, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.